Bread in the dust twin suns baked the edge of outpost Helen until even metal cried. Heat waves shimmered off rooftops, bending the view like a half-forgotten dream. Scavengers wandered the outer roads, searching through dry dust for scraps of wire or ration wrappers, and somewhere near the main supply lane, a human sat alone outside his shop, drinking lukewarm water from a tin cup. His name was Ewan. No rank, no titles, just Ewan. He was one of the few humans who still chose to stay behind in places others abandoned. He didn't belong to any fleet, didn't take orders. He ran a repair shop for broken loaders, scrap droids, and shattered mining bots. Business was slow. Sometimes days passed without a single visitor. But Ewan didn't complain. He liked the silence, like knowing his hands could still fix something, like being forgotten. Until the girl showed up. He didn't hear her at first. Just saw a small shadow moving near the side wall, crouched, still, not breathing loud enough to be noticed. Her skin was pale gold, covered in cracked dust, hair matted, eyes too large for her face. She looked alien, but not dangerous. More like broken glass that hadn't shattered completely. Ewan didn't move. He remembered what it was like to feel hunted and small. She stayed frozen, eyes locked on a half loaf of bread sitting on a barrel beside him. He didn't speak, just reached out slowly, broke off half the loaf, and placed it on a clean cloth. Then, without looking directly at her, he laid it down on the ground and stepped back. Minutes passed. Then she moved fast and silently, grabbing the bread like it might vanish, then retreating behind the corner. No thank you, no words. Just survival. But in that moment, Ewan felt something shift in the air. It wasn't just pity, it wasn't charity, it was recognition, like looking at a memory that was someone else's face. He didn't know who she was, or where she came from, or why his heart ached so much just watching her eat. But deep down, something old whispered, "This matters more than you think." Later that night, he left a thermal blanket by the wall. No girl in sight. Next morning, it was gone. The day after, he left water. Gone. No footprints, no clues, just silence. It's something stirring in his chest that hadn't moved in years. On the fourth day, he heard footsteps at dawn, soft ones, careful. He stepped outside, and there she was standing in the sun with the same quiet eyes. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a woman, taller, with the same pale gold skin, hair tied back. Her face was tired, like someone who had carried too much pain across too many years. She held the child's hand gently. They didn't speak at first. The woman just looked at Ewan, searching, measuring. Then, slowly, she placed a hand over her heart. Ewan did the same. The woman's voice came quiet, but clear. "You fed my daughter," she said. "You gave her safety." Ewan nodded. "She looked like she needed it." "We all do," the woman said, "but very few offer it." The little girl stepped forward, still holding the cloth from before. "We have nowhere else to go," the woman added. "But if you say no, we'll leave." Ewan looked at them. Then he stepped aside and opened the shop door wide. "It's cooler inside," he said, "and there's more bread." They walked in. What Ewan didn't know, what even the woman herself didn't fully understand, was that both she and her daughter carried something hidden, something ancient, something that had not awakened in centuries. And the moment they stepped across Ewan's threshold, the sky above shifted slightly, as if something far away had noticed. Asterisk under one roof inside of Ewan's shop wasn't much to look at, just shelves of old parts, a cracked workbench, and the scent of oil soaked deep into the walls. But to the woman and her daughter, it was something else entirely. It was safety, warmth, a pause in the running. They didn't ask for anything, didn't sit until Ewan offered. The little girl curled up in a corner with a blanket he handed her, while the woman, still silent, still alert, stood by the wall like a watchtower. Ewan poured the cups of warm grain broth, passed one to her. She didn't touch it at first. "It's not poison," he said, smiling. The woman blinked. "I believe you." Her voice carried a strange rhythm, soft, distant, as if shaped by a language older than human speech. She sipped carefully, eyes never leaving him. "You have a name?" Ewan asked. She paused. "Cyrea." "And hers?" "Arian." Ewan nodded. "Mine's Ewan. This place isn't much, but I've got room upstairs. Soft mats, water. It's not the Palace of Thorns, but it beats the sand." Cyrea tilted her head. "You know that name, the Palace of Thorns?" He shrugged. "Just something I heard once from an old trader in Ari stories. At that word, Narisiraya stiffened, only for a second. But Ewan noticed Dot. He pretended not to. Well, he said, rising from the table, "It's yours, if you want it. No charge." "Why?" she asked. Not cold, not unkind, just honest. Ewan looked at her. "Because I know what it's like to be forgotten. And because your daughter reminded me I still have a heart." Siraya didn't reply, but her shoulders relaxed slightly, and for the first time since arriving, she sat down. That night, when the stars were sharp and clear, Arian fell asleep upstairs, with a small plush droid tucked under her arm one Ewan had repaired years ago and never sold. It blinked weakly, but hummed a soft tune. Ewan and Siraya sat on the roof. "You don't ask questions," she said quietly. "Not unless someone wants to talk," he replied. Siraya stared at the horizon. "We've run for years, from city to crater, from world to world." "Why?" She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Because we exist." Ewan frowned. "That's enough to be hunted." Siraya nodded. "It's always been." She looked at him, not with fear, not with pity, but curiosity. "You're human, but something in you feels different." Ewan chuckled. "I'm not special, just tired and too stubborn to leave." "No," she whispered. "You're more than that." He looked up at the stars. "Maybe. We both are." And far above them, one of those stars blinked. Hand moved. Not a star at all. A probe. Watching. Recording. And now transmitting. Deep in a forgotten corner of the galactic net, someone received the data. An Inari pulse, faint, buried beneath heat signatures and civilian interference, but still there. The coordinates were clear, and they would be coming. Not to ask. Not to help. But to end what had once survived. And in the middle of it all was one quiet human, and the family he refused to let go. The echo they couldn't hit. 3 days passed. Ewan didn't ask where they had come from, and Siraya didn't offer, but something had changed in the house. The air felt warmer, more alive. Arian started to speak in full sentences, still soft, still unsure, but words filled with wonder. She asked Ewan questions about his tools, his machines, the stars painted on the old ceiling above her bed. She liked to watch the gears spin on his workbench and listen to the slow rhythm of his soldering iron. Sometimes she laughed, and every time she did, it echoed through the walls, like something sacred. Siraya, however, remained alert, always listening, always watching. One night, when the wind blew sharp through the valley, Ewan found her standing at the edge of the rooftop again, staring at the dark sky. "You feel it, don't you?" she asked without turning. "The cold?" He replied. "No." She whispered. "The eyes above?" Ewan nodded. "Yeah, like being watched through glass." She turned slowly. "They found us. I can feel the signal in the soil." "Who are they?" Siraya's jaw tightened. "They call themselves the Registry. Galactic Purity Enforcement. They erase what doesn't fit, and you don't fit. My daughter glows when she sleeps. Ewan, even you saw it." He had. The night before, he'd gone upstairs to check on her, only to find the room filled with soft light, her markings pulsing like quiet stars. "She doesn't know what it means yet," Siraya continued, "but they do." "What about you?" She hesitated. "I used to, but it was taken from me, or buried." Ewan watched her closely. "Can it be unburied?" Before she could answer, the old warning system near the shop door chirped once. Motion, outside. Ewan moved fast, not with fear but with a calm forged from many lonely years fixing broken things in a dangerous galaxy. He checked the viewer feed. 3 men, not in registry armor, but hired muscle, plain clothes. One of them tapped on the outer gate. "This a repair station," the man shouted. "Heard there's a human who keeps things running." Ewan didn't reply. Siraya stood beside him. "Now, they're not looking for repairs." "You think they're scouts?" "No," she said. "They're bait." Ewan stepped outside alone. The man at the front smiled wide. "Morning, friend. Just wondering if you've seen anything strange come through town. A woman and a girl." "Maybe. Not from around here." Ewan folded his arms. "I see a lot of travelers. Don't ask questions unless they break something." The smile vanished. "You're hiding them. That a problem?" The man leaned closer. "You don't know who you're protecting, do you?" Ewan's voice stayed even. "Don't need to." The man sneered. "You humans always get brave right before you disappear." Before anything else could be said, the ground under them pulsed just once. Not from explosives. From her. Inside the shop, Arian had woken up. Her markings glowed again, this time brighter, and something inside the building lit up in response. One of Ewan's old machines, long dead, suddenly surged with power. Lights blinked. Male HUMMED. Saya rushed upstairs. Arien stood calmly beside the window, eyes open but distant. They're near, she said. Who? The ones who burn people like us, she whispered. But the machine downstairs, it called to me, and deep in the shop, the machine she meant a forgotten Inari beacon, broken and silent for years, glowed like a reborn star. Ewan didn't remember where he'd found it. Maybe in a trade pile, maybe in an abandoned ruin, but now it pulsed in time with Arian's breath. It was hers now. Outside, the men backed away from the strange hum. They didn't understand what they were hearing, but they knew enough to be afraid. And far above, the registry fleet had locked on to a confirmed Inari signal and was preparing to descend. Asterisk, the machine that remembered her sky cracked before it screamed. Clouds didn't part, they split, as if pulled open by invisible hands. Above the valley, 3 black ships appeared like floating blades. No lights, no sound, just the presence of certainty. They had found her. They had found them. Inside the shop, the old machine continued to pulse with light. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It simply responded to Arian, to her breath, to her presence. It hadn't worked in years. It wasn't supposed to, but now it did. Ewan stood beside it, hands hovering over the warm metal. What is this? He asked. Cyrea's voice trembled. It's called a hearth code. Our ancestors used it to bind memory to place, to protect children when cities burned. This thing was in my back room, Ewan said, covered in rust. Because it was waiting, she whispered, for her. Upstairs, Arian sat cross-legged, glowing markings spreading down her arms and ankles now. Her eyes were open, but distant, locked on something no one else could see. They're speaking, she said calmly, not out loud, in symbols. Ewan, move fast, grabbing tools, welding torches, and pieces of reinforced shielding from his storage crate. Cyrea helped without needing instruction. They didn't speak of fear, only of what came next. Outside, the first shockwave hit, a focus pulse, slammed into the edge of the property, throwing up dirt and debris. It didn't aim to destroy, it aimed to scare, to make the human give up the fugitives. They didn't know Ewan. He stood at the front of his shop, now covered in a reinforced frame he had welded in place over the last hour. An old turret drone disabled long ago now stood reactivated beside him, humming softly. He didn't hold a weapon. He didn't need to. He was the weapon now. A voice boomed from the sky. You are harboring unregistered genetic anomalies. Surrender them and your property will be spared. Ewan squinted up at the ship, unimpressed. Come down and ask me in person, he muttered. Then, calmly, he opened a small transmitter panel near his elbow and pressed a single button. What did you just do? Cyrea asked from behind him. Told the town, he said. What's coming and who we're protecting. They'll run, maybe, or maybe they'll remember who helped them fix their machines. Who gave them food when their supply drones skipped this route. Maybe they'll remember me. He wasn't wrong. Minutes later, a group of locals arrived at the edge of the property. Not soldiers, just workers, scavengers, traders, each armed with whatever they had, tools, cutting beams, even mining gear. They didn't ask questions. They just stood with him. The registry ship paused. This wasn't protocol. Inside the house, Arian stood. Her voice had changed, still soft, but layered, as if more than one version of her now spoke. The beacon is ready, she said. Ewan turned to her. Ready for what? To unlock the rest, she whispered, of me. Then she stepped into the center of the room. The hearth code surged. Light poured from it like water. Not burning, not blinding, just true. Symbols rose in the air. Patterns. Languages Ewan couldn't read, but somehow understood. An Arianness. Little girl, who once shook from hunger, floated off the ground for just a moment. Then landed gently. I remember, she whispered. Remember what? Cyrea asked, breathless. Who we were. Who we're supposed to become. Then she looked at Ewan. And I know why you're different. What do you mean? He asked quietly. She stepped forward and touched his chest. You carry the old light, she said. You buried it when you lost your family, but it's still there. Ewan's heart stopped. He hadn't told anyone about his family. Not in years. Not even Saya. But Arian had seen it. Above, the registry ship charged its main cannon, and Arian looked up. They can't hurt us, she said. Dot, and the light inside the beacon flared again. But this time, it wasn't just hers. Dot, it was theirs. The fire that couldn't put out the registry ship's cannon glowed, charging with the cold blue fire of authority, impersonal, unfeeling, deadly. But before it could release that fury, something unexpected happened. The sky bent, now shattered. Dot, not broken. Dot, it bent. Dot, the cannon's light flickered. The ship shuddered slightly, as if the air itself no longer agreed with its purpose. And down below, at the center of a crumbling shop in a small crowd of locals, a little girl with glowing veins stood with her hand over a broken beacon, and the beacon responded. Dot, symbols danced in the air, no longer ancient, alive. Music hummed from it, low and strange, made of tones that stirred something deep inside every living being who heard them. Miners dropped their tools and stared. Dot, traders forgot their fear. Sci-Fi dropped to her knees, tears in her eyes. I thought it was lost, she whispered. Arian's voice was quiet, but steady. It wasn't lost. It was waiting. For what? Ewan wasn't sure, but then he felt it inside himself. The warmth, the memory, not a pain, but before the pain, before he lost his wife, before the world had turned cold. The moment when he had still believed in good things, and somehow, Arian's light brought it back. The registry ship adjusted, scanning harder, calculating, trying to override what it didn't understand. Its captain barked orders, unaware they were now being recorded by systems no longer under their control. The beacon had spread, not just in the room, but through the air. Through the sky, through the town's old network lines, and further. One of the locals, a boy with a broken scanner on his belt, watched the data flashing across his screen. It's going off, world, he whispered, broadcasting into the fringe relays. What does that mean? Someone asked. It means everyone's gonna hear this. The registry's cannon flickered again, then shut down completely. Not from failure, from refusal. The ship's internal systems began rejecting commands, refusing to aim, refusing to lock on. The crew scrambled, shouting, pounding consoles, but their controls now pulsed with the same soft light from below. They weren't in charge anymore. On the ground, Ewan turned to Arian. What exactly are you doing? Arian's glow softened. I'm not doing it alone. She looked at him, and for a moment, he saw her not as a child, but as something eternal, wearing a child's face. Something kind, something strong, something meant to heal. You lit the fire, she said, when you gave me bread. He stepped back, stunned. This all started with that. No, she said. It started when you opened the door. The fire inside you called to mine. Sci-Fi took Ewan's hand. You see now, she said. You didn't just save us. You reawakened us, and then something happened that no one expected. The registry ship, its engine still active, withdrew. Slowly, silently. Not defeated. But changed. It rose back into the clouds and vanished beyond the sky, leaving behind no destruction, only questions. And silence. And light. For the first time in years, peace fell over the valley, not the kind written into treaties, but the kind that grows in the hearts of those who choose kindness. When no one's watching, the people stayed, the beacon stayed, and Arian smiled. They'll come again, she said. Others. Some will want to destroy. Some will want to understand. Ewan nodded. And what do we do when they arrive? She reached for his hand. We greet them with open doors. And behind her, the shop, half metal, half wood, part home and part hope, glowed like a lantern in the dark. Asterisk, the signal that lit other world's news didn't spread the way it used to, not in official broadcasts, not in headlines, but through whispers, through shared recordings, through people who felt something change and didn't know why. And now, across half the galaxy, something was changing. Miners on Station 87 heard their old machines hum back to life with no explanation. Elders in refugee zones started dreaming in symbols they hadn't spoken since childhood. And somewhere in the ruins of the Inari Highlands, a group of survivors stood together as their skin began to glow for the first time in generations. They all traced it back to one signal. A human outpost, a girl, a beacon that shouldn't have worked, and a man who had given a starving child half a loaf of bread. In Outpost Helen, life didn't return to normal. It became better. People didn't just survive anymore, they began to build. You in single quotes as shop expanded, not as a business, but as a place of gathering. Tables and cushions filled the front room. Kids came after sundown to sit near the beacon, not because it glowed, but because it listened. Somehow, in ways no one could explain, it helped people feel heard, Cyrea taught others how to speak with the light, not control it, not weaponize it, but speak, to trust it. Ian smiled more now. She still glowed in her sleep, but the glow no longer pulsed with fear, it pulsed with purpose. And Ewan, he felt something he hadn't in a long time, like he belonged. But peace rarely lasts forever. It began with a visitor. Not registry. Not local. A young woman stepped into the shop one evening, wearing desert robes and old boots. Her face was calm, but her eyes were searching. I heard the signal, she said. Ewan looked up from the bench. You and half the galaxy. No, she said. I heard it, inside me. The way we used to. Cyrea stepped out from the back room, eyes widening. Inari, the girl nodded. Half. Enough. Arian ran forward and took her hand. Their markings lit up together in sync. Like mirrors finally finding each other, the girl dropped to her knees. We thought we were extinct, she whispered, but something called us home. Ewan's throat. Titan, this isn't a home, he said gently. It's just a shop. No, the girl said, looking at him. You don't understand. You're not just a human who helped. You're the Axis. The what? The old text spoke of it. Cyrea whispered. The Axis was not a person, it was a moment. A turning. When someone opened the door, the rest of the galaxy had long since sealed shut. The girl nodded. That's you. Ewan stepped back, stunned. But I didn't do anything. I just gave a kid bread. And that was enough. Arian said. More visitors came in the days that followed. Some were Inari, some were not, but all were searching for safety, for purpose, for each other. The registry didn't return, not with war, but with questions, requests. Some asked for guidance, others offered support, and one ambassador simply stood at the edge of the shop and wept, because he had never seen light like this, not since before the war, and no one could explain why it all began here. But Arian could. She stood on a creep one evening in front of the crowd and spoke softly. It started because someone didn't look away when they saw a child in the dirt. He didn't see danger. He saw hunger, and he answered it with kindness. The beacon behind her pulsed once, and everyone in that room felt it. Not power. Not fear, but belonging. The kind that can't be forced. Only chosen. The door that stayed open. The wind that blew through outpost Helen had changed. It no longer carried only dust and heat, but laughter, music, and the scent of shared meals. What once was a lonely edge of nowhere had become something else entirely. A haven, a spark, a beginning. Ewan stood outside his old shop. Now a living space filled with quiet magic and louder hope. The roof had been rebuilt. The walls were painted with glowing symbols left by visiting Inari, each one a name, a memory, a message left in trust. They didn't fade. They shimmered. Inside, the hearth code pulsed gently, no longer just a machine, but a part of something alive. Children from different species sat together on the floor, drawing shapes in the air. Arian moved between them like a thread weaving a new future, guiding them with soft words and glowing fingertips. She wasn't a child anymore. Not really. She was becoming something more, a guide, a bridge. Cyrea watched from the window, hands folded. The sharpness in her eyes had softened. The years of hiding and running had fallen away, replaced by something she never thought she'd feel again, peace. And Ewan? He still fixed things. Tools in hand. He patched walls, upgraded shields, and rewired panels. Not because anyone asked, but because it brought him joy. People called him a leader, a protector, a symbol. He never wanted to be any of that. He was just a man who once gave bread to a starving girl, and that had been enough. One day, a large transport ship landed at the edge of the settlement. It bore no weapons, no flags, just old insignias from a forgotten exploration fleet. 3 figures stepped out: an elder woman, a young pilot, and a child with quiet eyes. They walked slowly to the shop, stopping beneath the arch of painted metal. Is this the place? The pilot asked. This is it, the elder replied, the place where light returned. Ewan stepped forward, brushing dust off his hands. New travelers, new family, the woman replied. He smiled, then welcome home, and the child stepped forward, offering him a small carved stone marked with a symbol Ewan didn't know, but somehow understood. A symbol that meant thank you. That night, as stars filled the sky, Arian sat beside Ewan on the rooftop. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't opened the door? She asked. He nodded slowly. Sometimes. And then I remember, I was just doing what felt right. Arian looked at him, her eyes glowing gently. You didn't just open the door, she whispered. You became one. He chuckled. That sounds like something too big for someone like me. Maybe, she said. Or maybe the galaxy was waiting for someone small enough to change it from the inside out. And somewhere in the sky, 100 ships turned their course. Not because of war, not because of power, but because they heard the story of a girl, of a mother, and of a quiet human who gave them bread and never let them go.